Hello there everybody, my name's Dan. I'm a recently employed game designer. And this is everything wrong with Yorick, and what I would do about it. This video was made in response to a request from this viewer right here. So if you've got any game design stuff you'd like to hear me talk about, then drop it in the comments and I'll probably do it. Why come up with my own ideas when I can just steal yours? My aim with this video is to look at the character, identify areas where I think he isn't as fun or cool as maybe he could be, and then offer up my own suggestions for how he could be improved. I'm going to avoid talking numbers and balance and stats and things where I can, and instead focus on the mechanics. Of course, if I worked at Riot and all these suggestions got implemented, they'd need to be tested and all the values would need to be tweaked to make sure the character doesn't end up too strong or weak, but we can't do that, so there's not really much point talking about it. Let's get into it. Overall, I think Yorick has a cool theme as the thick old necromancer, and his niche as a dedicated split pusher is also pretty unique. However, the first overall issue I've identified is that I feel like his kit doesn't lean hard enough into the chunky split pushing summoner identity, because it's just too worried about making him also a good straight up duelist. The other main issue I found is that because Yorick has some built-in tankiness, can damage from range, and doesn't scale that much with defenses, he's able to build lethality, which lets him then just deal loads of damage while also still being kinda hard to kill. My aims with this rework will be to 1. Modify or replace abilities to focus more on split pushing and his pets rather than fighting, and 2. To make him scale better with defensive stats so that players are more motivated to build him chunkier, since that would fit his character fantasy better and also give him a less frustrating playstyle to pull off and play against. He's more fun as a bruiser, I promise. Let's start with the passive. Shepherd of Souls. If Yorick kills an enemy with his Q, Last Rites, or if an enemy champion or large monster dies near him, he spawns a grave. He also spawns one for every 12th, 6th, or 2nd enemy that dies near him, and that number's based on level. Up to 4 graves can exist at once. If you've got 4 and you spawn a new one, the furthest away one gets destroyed. Yorick can use Awakening, which is the second part of his Q, and Morning Mist, which is his E, to raise a little pet called a Mistwalker from each grave, destroying a grave in the process. Yorick can have 4 Mistwalkers active at a given time, and like the graves, new ones replace those furthest away. Mistwalkers are autonomous pets. They follow you around and they fight your target until they get into combat in a lane, where they'll act like minions unless you direct them with your E, but there'll be more on that later. They just fight with basic attacks. Their health and AD scales with Yorick's. Their attack speed scales with level. They get one shot by single target attacks, but they take half damage from AoE. If near Yorick, they get move speed and inherit any flat move speed bonuses from Yorick. They also get more speed when returning to him, scaling with how far away they are. Killing them grants 2 gold, but no XP and no CS. What's wrong with the passive? Well, it's just a bit overcomplicated, isn't it? And only being able to have 4 Mistwalkers is not especially exciting. I'm playing the Necromancer, man. I want a zombie horde. Them being worth gold is a problem with that though. If you could summon lots, you'd be giving your opponent money. The levels the grave spawn rate changes at are also quite random. I hate a big old power spike like that, so I'd prefer a smoother power increase if you were going to keep that. Walkers getting one shot by single target makes building health to make them tankier kind of pointless, and that just further motivates you to go lethality instead, so that, well, if they're going to get one shot, they might as well deal more damage before they get killed, right? Walkers also taking less AoE damage makes them annoying to remove if you're not going to waste a single target ability on them. Lastly, the infinite duration on the walkers means that they have to be balanced to be quite low impact. If an effect is potentially permanent, then it can't be allowed to be that strong. Not a lot of good things to say about that, as you can see. So instead of trying to fix it up, I'm just going to put it all in the bin. We'll keep the name and icon because I'm lazy, but otherwise this is going to be a whole new passive with following effects. When an enemy or monster is killed by Yorick, or when a pet controlled by Yorick dies, he gains stacks of Shepherd of Souls. Minions, small monsters, and Mistwalkers give him 1 stack. Cannon minions, the Maiden, which is from his ult, and large monsters give him 3 stacks, and champions and epic monsters give him 10. That is obviously up to tweaking. Yorick gains a small amount of health regen and mana regen per stack. New stacks do not refresh the duration of existing stacks, and the regen per stack scales with level. I think this works. It gives him great sustain, which allows for really relentless split pushing. It motivates him to summon as many pets as possible too, to maximise stacks, which is something we'll allow later. And it also removes the passive but really complicated pet summoning situation, which we're going to replace with something more interesting in a minute. But where are the Mistwalkers? Don't worry, they aren't gone. I've just moved the summoning over exclusively to the queue, so I'll talk about my changes to them there. Speaking of which, Yorick's Q is Last Rites.
Did you know that you have rights?
On activation, he resets his basic attack timer and empowers his next basic attack within 5 seconds with an uncancelable wind-up, 50 bonus range, bonus AD scaling physical damage, and causing it to heal him for a percentage of his missing health. If there are 3 or more graves nearby while this is active or on cooldown, then Yorick can cast Awakening by pressing Q. This spawns a Mistwalker from each nearby grave. My first issue with this is that the missing health heal makes him frustratingly tanky while at low health, even without defensive items. It has the same issue as Yorick passive. Because it gets stronger the lower you get, it can just lead to these really cheesy situations where the character is able to survive on really low health for ages and just bait people into fighting them. The other issue is that waiting for 3 graves before summoning means that you often don't have any pets out early game, which is just a bit sad really. My new version is mostly the same as the old, except for the following changes. The heal, in the bin. Awakening, in the bin. Instead, if Last Rites hits a champ, large or epic monster, or kills a target, a Mistwalker is summoned at that location. Simple. Talking of Mistwalkers, here are my changes to those little guys. They now gain a portion of all Yorick stats, not just health and AD. They are no longer one-shot by single target stuff. They no longer take reduced damage from AoE, although I'm not sure about that one. Mistwalkers are also now ghosted to prevent blocking movement, since that's always annoying. And here's the big one, they now take a tiny amount of both magical and physical damage every, let's say, 0.2 seconds. Every time that damage is dealt, it is slightly increased. Now, what's good about all that? First up, the removal of the heal stops the cheesy staying alive at low health stuff. The new Mistwalker summoning, it's a lot simpler, easier to understand, easier to pull off, more enjoyable overall. Walkers scaling with everything opens up more build options, which is always fun. Summoning walkers on pretty much every queue lets you build up a nice big swarm of them, which is also made possible by the quantity cap being removed when I trashed the old passive. We like this because a big old swarm of zombies just fits the Necromancer fantasy a lot better. Walkers not giving gold then avoids the issue of you feeding your opponent with your increased number of summons. Walkers no longer getting one shot or shrugging off AoE means that players have to treat them as an extension of Yorick and choose whether to focus them to reduce his damage output or just go for a kill on Big Papa. Now, elephant in the room, the dot. This effectively gives the walkers a duration, which you can then increase by buying more defensive stats. The constant mixed damage means that health, resists and regen will increase their duration. Now walkers aren't infinite, you can have more of them and they can potentially be balanced to be stronger. Onto the W, Dark Procession. 0.75 seconds after activation, Yorick forms a ring of terrain at the target location for 4 seconds. The ring takes 1 damage from enemy champ basic attacks and gets 1 shot by turrets. Its health goes from 2 to 4 based on points in the ability. My big issue with this ability is that it doesn't contribute directly to Yorick's split pushing playstyle or his summoner theme, other than that they've just kind of said that it's a ring of spirits. Yeah, it gives him a bit more safety, which is useful as a split pusher, but that's just useful for anyone. It's not split pushing specific. It's also just kind of annoying to play against rather than cool or impressive or intimidating in any way. You get hit by it and you kind of just sat there like, okay, guess I'll auto this wall for a bit and then I can get on with playing the game. So I'm scrapping it. Like the old passive, it's going straight in the bin. Once again, I'm keeping the icon on the name though because I'm lazy. New Dark Procession goes something like this. On activation, conjure a cloud of spirits at the target location, which every 0.2 seconds applies a stacking shields to all allies within it equal to a small percentage of their max health. Recasting this ability while Dark Procession is active will cause it to move to the target location at a rate scaling with Yorick's movement speed. The AoE should be enough to cover a full stationary minion wave. Cooldown and duration are probably unchanged unless testing says otherwise, and the spawn delay is now gone. Here's why I think this is much better. First of all, it still provides survivability for Yorick, so it does help him defensively like the old W did. It's just less good for offense since you can't trap people and then just set the boys on them. The shielding on your minions and pets can help you push in a really unique way, since it can protect them from incoming damage, making them survive longer and therefore deal more damage over their lifetime. Yes, it could be used to mess with people's last hitting potentially, but that's pretty original, and it's not unprecedented in other MOBAs either. If Dota can have denies, then League can have one ability that potentially delays last hits. But hey, if that's too much, you could always just nerf it to not work on minions, and it would still be good. Another cool thing here is that because your pets' durations are based on them taking constant damage, this effectively extends their durations by blocking some of that damage. And the fact that this is a max health shield, and your pet's health scales with yours, you increase the shield amount on you and your pets by buying more health, incentivizing a tankier build. Lastly, the fact that you can move the cloud around lets you follow your minions and pets down the lane with it as they push, so it behaves kind of like another summoned pet. E-time, Morning Mist. Yorick chucks a glob of mist that hits in a little cone at the target location. Does magic damage to enemies equal to 15% of their current health or a minimum amount which scales with AP, whichever's highest. This slows champs and monsters by 30% for 2 seconds and curses them for 4, which reveals them. While cursed, they take 20% bonus damage from the next 8 attacks by Mistwalkers, and if they go near a grave, it gets consumed to spawn another walker. Yorick and his pets get 20% move speed when moving towards cursed enemies, and the walkers can leap to them every few seconds, which deals 100% of their AD as physical damage, meaning when you hit someone with your E, all your active walkers are just going to jump straight on them. My problem with this, once again, is that it isn't really very helpful for pushing, since its AoE is just too small, and the minion damage isn't great. It's just too poke focused. Also, the current health damage down to a minimum threshold which then scales with AP is overcomplicated. Feels like it was just done to be different for the sake of it. For a new version, I'm keeping the ability, but with the following changes. AoE size increased to hit a full stationary minion wave, current health damage removed, the damage is now physical, and it's equal to the old minimum damage, plus like 50% of your AD, give or take. Raising Mistwalkers from graves has been removed from this ability, since the graves are also removed. Curse no longer empowers the next 8 Mistwalker attacks. Instead, it increases the damage dealt by Yorick and his pets by 20% to the cursed enemy for the duration. As with most things, that 20% is probably going to be changed through testing. And lastly, this ability now affects structures. The ability is now super useful for pushing. It's easier to itemize against though, because it's physical and not health scaling, but it can also deal better damage because it's AD scaling. Then you've got the removal of the 8 attack limit from the curse, which makes it scale better because you've got more pets now and potentially more attack speed for them. Finally, the ult, Eulogy of the Isles. Yorick summons the Maiden of the Mists and a number of Mistwalkers, scaling with points in this ability at the target location. The Maiden is a targetable pet who will stick around until either she or Yorick is killed. The Maiden follows Yorick about and fights with him like the Walkers do. Once the Maiden's been around for 10 seconds, this can be recast once per Maiden to set her free, meaning she's going to then push the nearest lane until she dies. In combat, the Maiden uses basic attacks, which deal magic damage scaling with Yorick's AD. Her health also scales with his, but her resists scale with level. She takes 30% less damage from minions, and she's got a few special abilities too. Natural Recovery means she regens a tiny little bit of health per second. Endless March means she's ghosted and also follows Yorick about. You've got Touch of the Maiden, which means that her autos mark targets that aren't structures, and then if Yorick hits a marked target, they take some max health magic damage, which is capped against monsters. And then finally, you've got Undead Army, which means if there are less than 4 Mistwalkers under the Maiden's command, she raises another anytime a nearby enemy dies. Despite the complexity of all that, the issues with it are pretty simple. Just like the old Walkers, because the Maiden has an infinite duration, she isn't able to be that strong. This means that the immediate impact of pressing the ability is quite low. Then, once you've summoned the Maiden, she is terrible to control. Since she's kind of autonomous, but then also follows you around, actually trying to get her to hit your targets and not tank turret shots for no reason feels like herding a real chunky cat. The fact that your options are either to just kind of drag her around or to let her loose down a lane means that you don't feel that much like a cool necromancer when you've got your ulti on. So here's my version. On activation, the Maiden's conjured at your location and then she rushes towards the target location, which is up to 1,000 units away, and she's followed by a wave of mist. As with everything, 1,000 subject to change. The mist always goes the full distance even if the Maiden doesn't, like Hecarim ult. Enemies, including structures, hit by the mist take magic damage scaling with Yorick's AD. Yep, I know I moved the E away from magic damage, but I think you can get away with it on the ulti. The Maiden can move any distance from Yorick. Now here are my changes for the Maiden. All her stats scale with Yorick's, just like the Walkers. She takes constant mixed damage which gradually increases, just like the Walkers. The Maiden is no longer autonomous, you have full control over her. You can recast the ability as many times as you like while the Maiden is active to make her move to a location or attack a target. It's like Tibbers. Endless March? Gone. Except for the ghosting, because you don't need it, since the Maiden doesn't have to stick with you anymore, and she's already scaling with your move speed. Natural Recovery? Gone, because she's inheriting regen from you. Touch of the Maiden? Gone. Like the old E, it's just an overcomplicated damage source. Don't need it. For Undead Army, it now no longer stops summoning walkers once there are 4, because we've removed the cap. So if the Maiden is out, and something dies near her, she just summons a walker. This means that if you kill something with your Q, 2 walkers get summoned. You summon 1 from your Q and then 1 because of the Maiden. That's more like it. The wave gives this ability way more immediate impact. Being able to control the Maiden means she can just be much more useful in combat. And it also raises the skill ceiling nicely, because you can potentially be controlling 3 characters at once with your ulti and W active. Like with the walkers, the fact that the Maiden has a duration now, thanks to the constant damage, means that she can be balanced stronger since she isn't potentially infinite. And just like with the walkers, having her duration effectively scale with your defensive stats encourages you to buy those instead of flat AD. Also, on the balancing front, taking out all those overcomplicated little abilities just leaves more room in her power budget for raw stats, so she's better at fighting and pushing. Also on that note, the Maiden doesn't need to be near Yorick, so the cool idea of pushing 2 lanes at once is still viable. There you go folks, everything wrong with Yorick and what I would do about it. If you liked it, like it. If you didn't, don't. Share this video around if you want to make my day. If you got something to say, chuck it in the comments, and if you want to see more from me, subscribe and hit that bell icon. Bye!